Millionaire refused to believe his pregnant wife until her final letter shattered him. They called him the man who had everything: limitless wealth, a sprawling estate, and a charismatic presence that could bend any room to his will. But behind Andrew Wallace's triumphant smile lay secrets and shadows known only to his wife. Catherine's secrets she carried close to her heart, secrets that threatened to unravel the perfect life he had so meticulously crafted. When Catherine announced she was pregnant, Andrew scoffed at her, dismissing it as a desperate lie. Little did he know that very disbelief would spell his undoing. In the hushed corridors of a silent home, a final letter waited, ready to destroy him forever. Andrew Wallace was born into a world that always bent in his favor. From the moment he took his first breath, doors opened for him, whether it was acceptance into the most prestigious private schools, effortless social connections, or later, invaluable business opportunities. Yet for all his success, there was something about Andrew that both captivated and unsettled people. He wielded power with a steady hand, but behind his polished charisma and philanthropic appearances, he could be relentlessly cold. He made his first million at the age of 23 by founding an investment firm that specialized in underwriting risky startups. Friends and family looked on, impressed yet slightly uneasy, as Andrew's company expanded rapidly, propelled by his uncanny ability to spot lucrative ventures before the mainstream market got wind of them. He was the unstoppable wonder kid of finance, featured in glossy magazines and hailed as a future titan of industry. By 30, Andrew possessed an empire of holdings sprawling across technology, real estate, and entertainment. Headlines called him a prodigy. Those closest to him knew he was a man who always got what he wanted. Catherine Evans came into Andrew's life at a charity gala in downtown Chicago, where he was the guest speaker. She had been volunteering for a local non-profit dedicated to helping homeless youth find mentorship and career guidance. The location of the gala? The magnificent Field Museum, a real-life Chicago landmark recognized by many. People flocked there for the illustrious dinosaur skeletons and ancient Egyptian artifacts. But on that evening, the main attraction was Andrew Wallace, the young millionaire adored by the press. Catherine, dressed in a modest navy blue gown, was busy ensuring everything backstage ran smoothly. She'd seen Andrew from a distance, tall, confident, impeccably dressed in a tailored black suit. Yet it wasn't his wealth or fame that had her heart fluttering. It was the intensity in his eyes as he addressed the audience, speaking passionately about creating opportunities for underprivileged children. She felt certain it was more than a mere performance. Perhaps he truly cared. When Andrew stepped off the stage, the coordinator introduced him to Catherine. He flashed a grin, polished as any politician's, and extended his hand. "You did a fantastic job organizing tonight," he said, voice low and warm. "I'm Andrew Wallace." A slight blush crept over Catherine's cheeks. "It's really a team effort," she replied, shaking his hand. "I'm Catherine Evans." That conversation ran all of 30 seconds, but it ignited a spark in both of them. Andrew enjoyed the sincerity in her voice, the honesty with which she spoke about her charitable work. Catherine was dazzled by his seeming humility. Though he had riches beyond imagination, that night Andrew showed genuine interest in the philanthropic cause, asking for details and pledging support. Over the following months, Andrew pursued Catherine in a whirlwind of high-end dinners, expensive gifts, and lavish weekend trips. She once tried to protest. "You don't have to spoil me like this," she would say, especially when he presented her with a diamond necklace or flew her to Napa Valley just for wine tasting. But Andrew's standard reply was, "Nothing is too good for the woman I love." Catherine, who came from a middle-class background, found herself stepping into a life she could never have dreamed of where. PSYP treatment was the norm, and Andrew's every whim felt unstoppable. She grew concerned about losing herself in his opulent world, but he showered her with such affection that her worries faded. Each kind gesture, every sweet note he wrote, chipped away at her doubts. Before a year had passed, Andrew proposed with a ring so large that Catherine felt uncomfortable just looking at it. "I want to share everything with you," he said softly, kneeling before her in a quiet corner of his parents' mansion. "You're my light." She accepted tearfully, convinced she had found her forever partner. She believed Andrew's heart was as grand as his bank account, an assumption that would cost her dearly. Their wedding was a star-studded affair, hosted at a stunning estate overlooking Lake Michigan, with hundreds of guests, reporters from major magazines, and a performance by a world-famous violinist. Catherine wore a delicate lace gown that accentuated her graceful figure. Andrew, in a white tuxedo, looked every bit the prince from a fairy tale. Cameras flashed, guests applauded, and for those blissful moments, Catherine believed she was stepping into the life she'd always wanted. During their honeymoon in Bali, Andrew treated her to sunrise breakfasts on private beaches and surprise spa days in the lush rainforest retreats. She was astonished by the scale of his generosity. Her family back home was equally amazed, though a few aunts and uncles joked nervously about how Catherine might handle such an extravagant existence. In the first year of their marriage, Catherine and Andrew spent most of their time traveling Paris, Tokyo, Sydney, wherever. Andrew's business interests or philanthropic projects took him. Catherine played the devoted partner role smoothly, always polite, always ready, with a gracious smile. She took meticulous notes when they visited underfunded schools or youth centers across the globe. She helped Andrew shape philanthropic initiatives for his personal foundation. If Andrew was hailed as a visionary, Catherine was widely praised as the empathetic driving force behind his more charitable pursuits. Yet there were small signs that Andrew's compassion had limits. At times, he treated Catherine's suggestions about philanthropic strategies dismissively, only truly listening if they aligned with his business goals. He was quick to put on a show of charity, but equally swift to switch to cold pragmatism if an initiative threatened his bottom line. Catherine, deeply empathetic by nature, found these moments disquieting, but she rationalized them away. "He's just a savvy businessman," she told herself. "He's got huge responsibilities." Still, a flicker of concern remained in her heart. In their second year of marriage, Andrew's corporate empire soared to unanticipated heights. He made a landmark deal with a tech giant in Silicon Valley, which quadrupled his personal net worth almost overnight. Media outlets were brimming with stories about Andrew's unstoppable rise, the charismatic face of modern capitalism. Catherine basked in the glow of his success, happy to see him recognized for his acumen. However, behind the scenes, she noticed a growing distance. Andrew's work schedule became even more punishing. He attended more high-profile functions, networked with influential political figures, and courted international investors. Catherine tried to be supportive, offering companionship at formal dinners, filming heartfelt testimonial videos about their philanthropic journeys, and doing her best to maintain a comfortable home environment. But Andrew seemed to drift further into a world she couldn't fully access. Sometimes, when she asked him about his day, he would say, "I'm busy, Catherine," with a dismissive wave. His sharp tone stung, but she swallowed her hurt. After all, he was under enormous pressure. Surely she could forgive a moment of impatience. The bigger challenge came when Andrew had less time for the philanthropic work that had once bonded them. "We'll get to it later," he'd say, whenever Catherine suggested scheduling visits or launching new initiatives. "There's no hurry." Catherine worried that he was prioritizing profits over people, but she tried to reassure herself that as soon as he stabilized his new deals, he would refocus on their charitable endeavors. She believed that deep down, Andrew was still the caring man she had fallen in love with. After a weekend trip to New York, where Andrew spent half the time in closed-door business meetings, Catherine started feeling uncharacteristically fatigued. She chalked it up to jet lag or the stress of social obligations, but a week passed, and the weariness didn't subside. Then came the sudden bouts of nausea in the morning. A friend teased her, "Are you sure it's just travel sickness? Or is there another reason you might be feeling queasy?" Catherine's eyes widened. Could it be? She and Andrew had briefly discussed wanting children someday, but he seemed in no rush to start a family. Still, Catherine had always felt a strong maternal yearning. She decided to take a home pregnancy test, and to her astonishment, it came out positive. Excitement mingled with anxiety. She phoned her sister, who lived nearby, and confided the news. "I can't wait to tell Andrew," she said, her voice quivering with an odd mixture of joy and trepidation. She knew she wanted this child more than anything, but how would Andrew react? That evening, Catherine prepared a simple but elegant candlelit dinner at home to share the news. She waited for Andrew to return from his office. When he walked through the door, looking harried and exhausted, Catherine greeted him with a warm embrace. "I have wonderful news," she said softly, leading him to the dining room. "We're going to have a baby." For a moment, Andrew stood still. His expression was indecipherable, a swirl of surprise and something else, annoyance, concern. She couldn't quite tell. He finally spoke. "A baby?" He repeated the word slowly. "Are you sure?" She nodded, offering him the positive test result as though it were a fragile treasure. Andrew sank into a chair, staring at the test. Then, to her disbelief, he scoffed. "I don't see how this could be. We've always been careful. Are you certain you didn't make a mistake somewhere?" Catherine felt her heart clamp. "Of course I'm sure. These tests are highly accurate." And Andrew cut her off with a dismissive gesture. "I'm not prepared for this, Catherine. You know how critical this phase of my business expansion is. We can't afford distractions." She stared at him, speechless. Could this really be the same man who once vowed to share all of life's blessings and burdens with her? "I would never consider our child a distraction," she said, hurt flickering in her eyes. "This is a blessing." Andrew rose abruptly, tossing the test kit onto the table. "Let's not jump to conclusions. Go to a proper doctor, get it confirmed, then we'll talk." That night, Andrew slept in his home office, under the pretense of working late. Catherine stayed awake in their master bedroom, tears coursing down her cheeks. She tried to make sense of his reaction. The Andrew she believed in would never belittle her excitement. Was it the pressure of his business deals? She recalled that he'd once told her that becoming a father was the ultimate responsibility, something he'd only consider when everything was absolutely perfect in his empire. Maybe he was simply overwhelmed. Over the next few days, Catherine scheduled an appointment at a reputable obstetrics clinic in Chicago. She wanted to confirm everything and present Andrew with incontrovertible proof, hoping it would calm his worries. Andrew didn't accompany her to the first appointment, claiming an urgent business meeting. Despite his absence, Catherine left the clinic with an ultrasound image that made her heart sing with wonder. She rushed home, cradling the black and white picture. "Andrew," she called out as soon as she stepped into the hallway. But the house was quiet. He was still at work. She texted him the news. "Ultrasound confirms the pregnancy. We're due early next year." His reply came hours later. "We'll talk." When he finally returned, Catherine placed the ultrasound photo in front of him. "Look," she said, "that's our baby." She smiled, tears of joy brimming in her eyes. Andrew's expression remained stony. He studied the image for a few seconds and then said, "So it's real." His voice lacked warmth. "Do you really think this is the best time for us to have a child?" She blinked, taken aback by his coldness. "Does it matter if it's the best time? This is our baby, Andrew. a human life. He exhaled wearily. I'm sorry. I'm just concerned. I have major acquisitions in progress. This is going to be a PR nightmare if things go sideways. My entire board will question whether I can keep my head in the game. Catherine's jaw tightened. Your board? I can't believe you're comparing our baby to a board of directors' approval. Andrew rose to get himself a glass of water. I'm just trying to be practical. In that moment, Catherine felt a foreign sense of dread settle in her chest. She remembered how, at times, Andrew's philanthropic veneer cracked under the weight of pure ambition. And now, in the face of this life-changing development, he seemed more concerned about his corporate image than the miracle growing inside her. In the weeks that followed, Andrew made a series of remarks that chipped away at Catherine's confidence. He started implying that maybe her test results were inaccurate, or that perhaps she was exaggerating the situation. He even suggested she do further tests at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota to rule out any mistakes. It was as if he wanted to manufacture doubt about her pregnancy rather than embrace it. Catherine, determined to quell his suspicions, traveled to the Mayo Clinic for a second opinion. The diagnosis was indisputable. She was 8 weeks pregnant, and everything looked healthy so far. She returned with a full medical report, hoping that her diligence would satisfy Andrew. But Andrew's response was baffling. He refused to read the documents, brushing them aside as irrelevant until I decide what's best for us. Stung by his arrogance, Catherine argued back, pressing him to understand that the baby's development was a reality no matter what he thought. He became increasingly combative. At one point he muttered, "For all I know, this could be a ploy to trap me. I'm not going to be a pawn in some emotional blackmail scheme." Catherine recoiled as if he'd struck her. "Are you accusing me of lying about our child?" she asked, voice trembling. Andrew didn't answer directly. He merely looked away with a stony glare. The wedge between them grew. Andrew spent more nights in his office, or claimed he had to stay at hotels near the airport to catch early flights. Catherine felt a crushing loneliness in the mansion's elegant rooms. She used to think those wide hallways and vaulted ceilings symbolized grandeur. Now they felt hollow and cold, amplifying her isolation. Around that time, a swirl of gossip began infiltrating social circles. Catherine heard snippets at charity luncheons and through whispered remarks from acquaintances. Andrew was rumored to be involved with someone else, a rising star in the tech sphere, rumored to have a rebellious streak and a seductive allure. Her name was Alessandra Pierce, an AI entrepreneur who seemed to be everywhere in Andrew's new network. Catherine tried to ignore the rumors, dismissing them as malicious talk. Yet, in her quieter moments, she found herself wondering if Andrew's reluctance to accept her pregnancy had something to do with another woman. One afternoon, Catherine returned from a prenatal appointment to discover a single diamond earring in their living room. It wasn't hers. She froze, staring at the glittering piece of jewelry on the glass coffee table. Her mind raced. Could it be that Andrew had brought someone here? When Andrew came home that evening, she confronted him, holding the earring in her hand. "What's this?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. He barely glanced at it. "I have no idea," he replied with a shrug. "Don't lie to me," Catherine demanded, tears threatening to spill. "I heard rumors about Alessandra. Is this hers?" Andrew rolled his eyes. "Let's not be dramatic. Someone might have dropped it during one of my business meetings. My associates bring their assistants sometimes." Catherine clenched her fist around the earring, her mind swirling with fear and anger. But Andrew offered no comfort, no reassurance. He dismissed her suspicions as paranoia. That evening, he brushed past her and retreated to his office, leaving Catherine reeling from the possibility that her own husband might be betraying her, all while calling her pregnancy a lie. Month by month, the tension escalated. Catherine's belly began to show, but Andrew refused to acknowledge her condition. If outsiders asked about the pregnancy, Andrew would laugh and say something like, "Let's not jump ahead of ourselves," or "Catherine likes to think she's pregnant." Such remarks humiliated her. She tried to keep a brave face, but inside she felt devastated. She confided her distress to her sister, who was furious on Catherine's behalf. But Catherine insisted on handling the issue privately. Still deeply in love with the man she thought Andrew was, she clung to hope that he would come around, that one day he would see the truth. She continued her prenatal care, following every piece of medical advice meticulously, ignoring Andrew's dismissive attitude. She told the doctors about her emotional stress, but there was little they could do beyond offering her gentle reassurance. Meanwhile, Andrew's business soared to ever greater heights. He was photographed smiling alongside CEOs, celebrating new mergers, and inaugurating philanthropic programs that Catherine was no longer a real part of. Reporters praised him for balancing multiple projects while building a new branch of his charitable foundation. Yet Catherine, the person who had once been central to his philanthropic efforts, sat at home, pregnant, with no acknowledgement from the man who was supposed to be her biggest ally. By the time Catherine was in her 8th month, she had grown frail from emotional turmoil. She had tried every avenue to talk to Andrew, to plead with him to accept this child, to attend a single ultrasound appointment, to even be there for a single doctor's checkup. He refused. His rejections came in clipped tones or complete silences. Now she was certain he was unfaithful or at least consumed by other interests. And still, she carried the child alone, emotionally abandoned. Then came the day she discovered Andrew's firm was planning a celebratory retreat for key investors at a high-end Caribbean resort. When she asked if she could join, hoping to spend some time with her husband, he dismissed the idea. "It's business, Catherine," he said. "You wouldn't be comfortable in your condition." She gazed at him with teary eyes. "I'm your wife. I want to stand by your side." His response was a stony silence, followed by a swift exit. And just like that, Andrew disappeared on a private jet for a week-long event, leaving Catherine alone in the mansion. She spent the days pacing, her pregnant belly a constant reminder of how her life had changed and how little Andrew seemed to care. But the final straw wasn't Andrew's absence. It came in the form of a leaked photo surfacing in a tabloid, showing Andrew at the resort with Alessandra by his side, laughing at some inside joke. He appeared carefree, with not a hint of shame or worry. The headline read, "Andrew Wallace's Secret Paradise." Catherine had never felt such betrayal. She shut herself in the bedroom, sobbing until her chest hurt. She wondered how she could bring a child into a world where its own father refused to even acknowledge its existence. Shortly after Andrew's return, Catherine experienced a severe complication. Late one night, she woke up with sharp pains ripping through her abdomen. Alarmed, she struggled to sit up. A wave of dizziness and cold sweat overtook her. She tried to call out for Andrew, but he wasn't in the master bedroom. Over the past months, he'd taken to sleeping in another wing of the mansion, and no staff was around at that late hour. Summoning what strength she had, Catherine managed to reach her phone on the nightstand. She dialed 911, her voice trembling as she explained her situation. An ambulance arrived, and paramedics found Catherine alone, pale and in excruciating pain. Andrew was nowhere to be seen, having returned from a late dinner meeting and holed himself up in his study, oblivious. At the hospital, doctors discovered Catherine's blood pressure was dangerously high, and there were indications of distress to the fetus. She needed immediate monitoring and possibly an emergency C-section if her condition worsened. Fighting back tears, Catherine asked a nurse to contact Andrew, but he arrived only hours later, looking annoyed and inconvenienced. as though the medical emergency were a scheduled appointment messing with his timetable. He barely looked at Catherine, who was hooked to monitors, her face streaked with tears. "What's going on?" he asked the doctor coldly, as if he were discussing a questionable business deal rather than his wife's critical condition. The doctor explained Catherine's situation. "We need to ensure the baby isn't in danger. We might have to deliver early if her vitals don't stabilize." Andrew's expression remained inscrutable. He simply nodded, muttered, "Do what you must," and stepped out to take a phone call. Catherine observed him through half-lidded eyes, her breath coming in shallow gasps. In that moment, she realized Andrew would never truly be there for her or their child. Whatever illusions she'd clung to about his love or paternal instincts were irreversibly shattered. Fortunately, Catherine's vitals improved and the crisis abated. The doctor recommended bed rest for the remainder of her pregnancy, with minimal stress. Andrew arranged for a private nurse at the mansion, but displayed no empathy, hardly interacting with Catherine during her recovery. He spent more nights away, leading her to suspect he was continuing his affair with Alessandra, or who knew how many others. As the due date approached, Catherine's health took another dip, but this time more emotional than physical. She felt trapped in a gilded cage, a mansion filled with luxuries, but devoid of love. Andrew's coldness had hollowed her out. She knew the stress wasn't good for the baby, and she was terrified of the future her child would face with such a father. Around this time, she made a decision that would forever alter Andrew's life and her own. Late one night, she woke up and shuffled to the ornate desk in the bedroom. She took out a sheet of thick, cream-colored stationery, a relic from happier times when she used to write Andrew little love notes. With trembling hands, she began composing what she called her final letter, a document that contained every ounce of her heartbreak, disappointment, and hopes for the child she carried. She wrote of how she had once admired Andrew for his ambition, believing it was matched by genuine compassion. She recounted the agony of watching him dismiss their unborn child, how it felt like a betrayal of everything she had ever believed about love. She revealed her deepest fears for the baby growing inside her, that it would enter a world where its father refused even to acknowledge it. She expressed sorrow that her own health was deteriorating, in large part due to the crushing stress and emotional abuse. But she also explained her determination to protect her child from Andrew's influence if necessary. Through every paragraph, Catherine's tears fell onto the pages, blotting the ink. As she poured out raw, unfiltered emotion, she added a last note at the end, an entreaty for Andrew: "If you ever truly loved me, remember what love means. Our baby deserves so much more than indifference. I pray you find your soul again, Andrew, before it's too late." She sealed the letter and tucked it away in a place only she knew, planning to mail it to Andrew at a moment she deemed right. Perhaps a part of her hoped Andrew would turn around, realize his mistake, and love her and their child before she had to send it. But the world had other plans. In the final weeks of her pregnancy, Catherine's condition took a sudden turn for the worse. She developed severe preeclampsia, leading to life-threatening complications. Her doctor insisted on an immediate cesarean section to save both mother and child. Catherine was rushed to the hospital by her private nurse, who frantically tried to reach Andrew. He was in Europe for a business summit, his phone switched off during meetings. Desperate calls went unanswered. Catherine was terrified, her body racked by waves of pain and fear. In the operating room, doctors fought valiantly to stabilize her vitals. An emergency C-section was performed. Catherine's baby, a tiny boy, was delivered prematurely, whisked away to the neonatal intensive care unit. Catherine caught only a glimpse of his small, wrinkled face before the nurses carried him off. She tried to call out, but her voice was weak. In the aftermath of the surgery, her blood pressure spiked uncontrollably, hemorrhaging ensued, and doctors battled to stop the bleeding. For several hours, Catherine's life hung in the balance, and despite every intervention, the complications proved too grave. She slipped away, never regaining full consciousness to hold her newborn son. When Andrew finally switched on his phone, he received dozens of urgent voicemails. By the time he rushed back to Chicago on a private jet, Catherine was gone. At the hospital, Andrew learned the horrific news. His wife had died giving birth, and his son, tiny and underweight, clung to life in the NICU. The shock hit him like a freight train, but so did a deep, gnawing guilt. For months, he had refused to believe or support Catherine, and now she was gone forever. After Catherine's funeral, Andrew roamed the silent halls of the mansion in a state of numbness. The staff and friends who came to offer condolences were met with vacant stares. He visited his infant son sporadically at the hospital, struggling to even look at the small incubator that held the baby. He couldn't fathom the depth of Catherine's love or the magnitude of his loss. He was just empty. One evening, a delivery arrived, a package addressed to Andrew with Catherine's handwriting on the label. Inside, he found Catherine's final letter. The nurse, who had helped Catherine in her last weeks, discovered it hidden in the bedroom desk after Catherine's passing and followed the instruction to mail it if anything happened to her. Andrew's hands shook as he read the letter. With every word, each tear-stained sentence, a chasm opened inside him. The letter spoke of Catherine's unwavering hope that he would change, how she had once admired him for what she believed to be his philanthropic heart, only to watch it freeze into a shell of self-interest. She described the pain of carrying their child alone, emotionally abandoned. She apologized for any moments she might have failed him, but insisted she loved him with every fiber of her being. In the letter's final plea, Catherine urged him to find the father within himself and give their child the love she never got to fully share. He finished reading, tears streaming down his face. The letter fell from his trembling hands and fluttered to the floor. In an instant, Andrew understood what he had lost. The heartbreak he had inflicted, the betrayal of his vows, and most devastating of all, the utter absence of any chance to make amends with his wife. His chest felt hollow, and for the first time in his life, he was utterly helpless, with no amount of money or power able to bring Catherine back or rectify the cruelty he had shown. The days following Catherine's death marked a domino effect of misfortunes for Andrew. First, one of his largest and most prized acquisitions collapsed due to a scandal involving falsified data. The blame traced back to Andrew's firm, which had failed to do proper due diligence. Lawsuits piled up, and Andrew found himself mired in legal battles. Then came the wave of negative publicity. Reporters and commentators who had once sung Andrew's praises now slammed him for his ruthless business tactics. Rumors about his marital issues leaked to the press, painting him as a heartless mogul who had neglected his pregnant wife. Disgruntled employees, spurred on by a general sense of public outrage, started speaking out about workplace abuses and the toxic culture within Andrew's empire. In the midst of this turmoil, Andrew was forced to step down from his CEO position to manage the crisis more discreetly. Shareholders lost confidence, and his company's stock value plummeted. Andrew watched helplessly as billions vanished from his portfolio in a matter of weeks. Meanwhile, his newborn son, named Henry by Catherine in a note found in her phone, remained in the NICU. Doctors informed Andrew that Henry needed special care due to complications from the premature birth. In earlier times, Andrew would have tossed money at any problem, believing that top-tier medical care would solve everything. Now, though, the issue wasn't just financial, it was emotional. He knew Henry needed a father's love, not just a caretaker's wages. Yet Andrew felt paralyzed by grief and guilt. During nightly visits to the hospital, Andrew would stand outside the NICU, staring through the glass at Henry's fragile form. The memory of Catherine's final letter reverberated in his mind. She had pleaded with him to find his humanity. His chest tightened every time he saw his son, tears filling his eyes as he realized that Henry was the last piece of Catherine he had left. If he walked away, he would be repeating the same abandonment he had shown Catherine. But was he even capable of being a father now? As time dragged on, Andrew's life became a dismal cycle of legal battles, media harassment, and lonely hospital visits. Alessandra Pierce, the rumored mistress, vanished from his life, no doubt wanting to distance herself from the sinking ship of Andrew's reputation. Business associates either abandoned him or demanded endless meetings to salvage what little they could. Andrew's voicemail was clogged with messages from lawyers and accountants. The mansion that once represented unbridled success now felt like an echo chamber of regrets. Late at night, Andrew would pace through empty corridors, replaying memories of Catherine's laughter, her gentle eyes, the warmth of her hand in his. He recalled how proud she'd once been of his charitable endeavors. Now, he recognized those philanthropic projects had been more about his image than genuine compassion. The hardest part was living with the knowledge that he had caused Catherine immeasurable suffering when she needed him most. The final letter was a daily reminder of that. He read it over and over, each time feeling as though a blade was slicing deeper into his heart. Henry remained in the NICU for weeks, gradually growing stronger. Medical bills soared, but that wasn't an issue for Andrew. He would have sold every asset if it meant keeping his son alive. Each time Andrew visited, the nurses urged him to step inside, to place a hand on the incubator, to talk to his child. It could aid the baby's development, they said. But guilt anchored him to the spot outside the glass wall, as if he wasn't worthy to approach this tiny life he'd so cruelly dismissed while still in the womb. Catherine's memory loomed large. How could he hold this baby after refusing to believe his existence? One evening, a kindly nurse approached Andrew. She had a grandmotherly aura and a gentle smile. "He needs you," she said softly. Andrew's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to say. Just tell him you're here," she said, guiding Andrew inside. He hesitated, heart pounding, as he inched closer to the incubator. Henry was asleep, wrapped in a tangle of tubes and monitors. A wave of protectiveness washed over Andrew, something primal he'd never experienced before. He placed his hand on the clear plastic. "I'm here," he whispered hoarsely, tears slipping down his cheeks. "I'm sorry, Henry. I'm so sorry." It was a small step, but in that moment, Andrew realized that redemption, if it was even possible, began with acknowledging the life he'd helped create and the love Catherine had so desperately wanted for their child. In the following weeks, Andrew made a commitment to be at the hospital every day, often staying for hours, reading stories or just talking to Henry in a hushed voice. Even though Henry was too tiny to fully respond, Andrew found solace in these moments. A paternal instinct he never knew he had begun to awaken. Legally, the lawsuits and financial crises raged on, but Andrew felt a shift in his priorities. Where once he was consumed by stock values and acquisitions, now he only cared about Henry's progress reports and the day the doctors would say, "You can take him home." Meanwhile, Andrew took steps to reorganize his business affairs. He sold off several divisions to pay for mounting legal fees and to settle lawsuits. He was forced to part with the extravagant mansion, downsizing to a smaller estate, though still large by normal standards. The media speculated that Andrew Wallace was on the brink of bankruptcy, but in truth, he still retained enough wealth to live comfortably. Yet for the first time in his life, the money felt inconsequential. Though the media called it a downfall, Andrew saw it as a form of penance. He deserved to lose what he once valued more than his wife. Hard karma had arrived, and he was determined to face it. Catherine's legacy finally, after several months, Henry was deemed healthy enough to leave the NICU. The day Andrew carried his son out of the hospital, he wept openly. The staff offered polite smiles, probably aware of the tragedy that surrounded Catherine's death. Andrew placed Henry in a car seat, and they drove to the new home, a modest suburban property compared to the old mansion, but more intimate. A nurse accompanied them for the first weeks, ensuring Henry's transition went smoothly. Late at night, when Henry cried, Andrew would rush to the nursery, rocking him back to sleep. Sometimes he hummed lullabies Catherine loved, though the sound cracked with emotion. In these moments, he felt Catherine's presence, as if she watched over them from somewhere beyond. He spoke to her in hushed tones, saying how sorry he was for every cruel word, every dismissive glance, and every suspicion he had cast on her honesty. Andrew also set up a trust fund for Henry's future, something Catherine would have wanted. Beyond finances, he pledged to teach Henry values of compassion and empathy, the values Catherine embodied. He sought guidance from child development experts, read parenting books, and even joined a local father's support group, albeit in disguise to avoid media attention. He realized how unprepared he was, but he refused to fail again. As Henry grew stronger, Andrew felt the urge to revisit Catherine's family, who had shunned him after her funeral, blaming him for her distress. He sent them letters and messages, each one an apology. Initially, they didn't respond, but Andrew persisted, longing to let them see Henry, who carried Catherine's eyes. Eventually, Catherine's sister agreed to meet. That afternoon was fraught with tension. Catherine's sister sat rigidly on the edge of a sofa in Andrew's new living room, eyeing him with a mixture of grief and anger. Henry, now a few months old, was asleep in a cradle nearby. Andrew spoke softly, voice trembling with remorse. He shared parts of Catherine's final letter and explained how her words had changed him forever. Tears welled in the sister's eyes as she read the letter for the first time. She wept, recalling how Catherine had always been the peacemaker, the one who believed in love even against all odds. "I can never undo what I did," Andrew said, "but I want Henry to know his mother's family. I want him to know the good she stood for." Catherine's sister gazed at the sleeping baby and then at Andrew. "He looks just like her," she whispered, tears streaming. "We'll do this for Catherine's memory, for Henry's sake." She paused, swallowing hard. "And because it's what Catherine would have wanted, I'll give you a chance to prove you can be a different man." Time marched on, and with every sunrise, Andrew felt the weight of Catherine's absence and the enormity of the promise he'd made to her in his heart. Those first few months of fatherhood were both tender and terrifying. Tender because holding Henry offered a glimmer of hope Andrew had never known before, and terrifying because he feared he could never be the kind of parent Catherine would have wanted him to be. He knew that no amount of money could shield him from the work required to give his son genuine love and stability. The lawsuits and corporate crises continued to swirl, demanding settlements and restructuring. But Andrew found himself less concerned with the grandiose ambitions that had once consumed his every waking moment. Where previously he had measured his worth by the rise and fall of his financial empire, now he measured it by whether Henry smiled that day, whether he ate well, whether he giggled when Andrew made silly faces. In quiet defiance of his old ways, Andrew resumed philanthropic work. Yet this time, he did it without the glare of media publicity. He funded programs for single parents, especially those who had been abandoned or left to fend for themselves, mirroring Catherine's lonely struggle. He visited shelters and mentorship centers, listening to stories of hardships and resilience. Each conversation reminded him of Catherine's final letter, which spoke about the importance of never turning a blind eye to love or to someone in need. Gradually, he found a small measure of peace in helping others, an echo of Catherine's compassion that lived on in him. Though the media initially painted him as a disgraced tycoon trying to repair his image, they soon lost interest when Andrew refused to offer interviews or allow cameras at his charitable visits. Their indifference suited him fine. He had come to understand that real change happened out of the spotlight, in the spaces where empathy and support were more important than glitzy headline events. Besides, he had a more important focus at home: Henry's growth, health, and emotional well-being. In time, Andrew downsized to a modest estate. He let go of much of the staff who had once buzzed around his old mansion, though he made sure they received generous severance packages and assistance finding new work. In an earlier era, he would have given this little thought. Now, he approached each decision with the question, what would Catherine do? Fatherhood itself was an education. Andrew learned how to change diapers, bathe a squirming infant, and soothe fevers in the small hours of the night. He discovered that reading bedtime stories required more than just voicing the words. It meant creating the gentle, reassuring presence of a caring father. Each step was humbling. At first, Henry fussed and cried in Andrew's arms, perhaps sensing his father's nervousness. But with time, baby and father found their rhythm together. On a particular afternoon, when Henry was able to sit up and giggle at Andrew's playful antics, Andrew felt a swelling in his chest, as though Catherine herself was smiling down on them. All the while, the memory of Catherine's final letter glowed like a distant lantern in Andrew's mind, guiding him through nights of doubt. He kept the letter stored in a small wooden box on his bedside table, its pages now lined with his tears, the ink smudged in places from the countless times he reread it. Whenever he felt even the faintest temptation to slip back into the single-minded pursuit of profits, he would read Catherine's words, each sentence reminding him of the destructive force of unchecked ambition. Andrew's focus gradually shifted from salvaging his tarnished public image to embracing the sort of personal transformation that Catherine had longed for. He reached out to business associates and asked for second chances, not to become the ruthless Andrew of old, but to create ventures that balanced profitability with genuine social impact. Some laughed him off, while a few recognized his sincerity and tentatively agreed to collaborate. Step by step, Andrew rebuilt a smaller, more ethically grounded version of his former empire, though he realized real success couldn't be measured on a financial ledger alone. Despite his newfound purpose, there were still nights when regret haunted him like a ghost. Memories of Catherine pacing the mansion's halls, her pregnant belly visible through her nightgown, mingled with recollections of his own dismissive attitude. Sometimes he jolted awake in cold sweats, heart pounding, convinced he could hear her voice calling for help. Those were the moments he would tiptoe into Henry's room, just to watch him breathe. A wave of both relief and sorrow would wash over him, and he'd whisper, "We'll make it through this, I promise." Weeks turned into months, and then into the first year of Henry's life. Where Andrew once surrounded himself with people who fueled his ego, now he welcomed a smaller circle of genuine friends and Catherine's family. Reconciliation with Catherine's sister remained delicate, but they found common ground in their mutual desire to see Henry grow up surrounded by love. She began to visit more often, helping Andrew navigate milestones like Henry's first steps. At times, she would recount stories of Catherine's childhood, painting a vivid portrait of the woman Andrew had failed to cherish in her final months. Those stories were painful for him to hear, but essential to preserving Catherine's memory for Henry. Over time, Andrew came to realize that redemption wasn't a finish line he could cross. It was a path he would walk for the rest of his life. Each day, he chose to be present for Henry, to practice kindness over callousness, to place love above ambition. The transformation wasn't easy. Habits and impulses forged by years of relentless pursuit of power didn't evaporate overnight. But Andrew was determined. He had lost Catherine forever, but through Henry he hoped to find a way to honor the best parts of her, the parts she had once seen in him. In the end, Andrew discovered a different version of success than the one he'd once prized. This success was measured in Henry's laughter, in the trust he began to rebuild with Catherine's family, and in the genuine connections he made through philanthropic endeavors inspired by Catherine's heart. The mansion was gone, the corporate spotlight had dimmed, and the tabloids had moved on, but Andrew felt something in his soul that he had never experienced at the height of his empire, the quiet comfort of being truly human. Years later, Henry, healthy, bright, and curious, climbed onto Andrew's lap one quiet afternoon. Andrew was sitting in a sunlit corner of their modest home, glancing at photos of Catherine. Henry pointed to one of the pictures showing Catherine beaming at a charity event. "Who's that?" he asked in a child's innocent tone. Andrew's throat tightened. "That's your mother," he said softly, pulling Henry closer. "She loved you very much." "Why isn't she here?" Andrew closed his eyes, pain flickering across his features. "She had to go away, little one. But she's always with us in our hearts." Henry pressed his cheek against Andrew's chest, comforted by his father's steady heartbeat. The moment was bittersweet, a reminder of all that had been lost, but also a testament to what had been gained, a renewed sense of purpose, a father's love, and a chance at redemption. In the quiet hush of that sunlit room, Andrew felt Catherine's presence, her final letter still echoing in his mind. He vowed never again to turn a blind eye to love. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey of heartbreak, regret, and hard-won redemption. Andrew Wallace learned the most painful lesson imaginable when his disbelief and neglect cost him the love of his life. Only after Catherine's final letter shattered his walls did he realize that no amount of money or ambition could replace the miracle of genuine love and family. If this story moved you, please consider sharing it to remind others that life's true blessings are fragile and ignoring them has grave consequences. Give this video a like if you felt the impact of Catherine's unwavering devotion. Leave us a comment on what part struck you the most, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that explore the complexities of the human heart. Together, let's continue to share life's lessons and uplift one another. Your support truly means the world.